Everyone, I'm Donna Bush. Welcome to our CID television live coverage of what's been happening weather-wise in our community all through the three Cayman Islands over the last couple of days. In the studio live with us, we have Her Excellency, the Governor, Mrs. Jane Owen, and our Deputy Premier, the Honorable Andre Ebanks, to talk about exactly how government has been handling the situation and preparations. Your Excellency, can you share your thoughts with us on exactly how things have been handled over the last few days?
Yes, I mean, I think, I hope people out there feel that there's been good communication and that you've seen quite a lot of what's been going on. It's always tricky when you're handling a storm and bad weather because of the unpredictability. So what we've tried to do is to make sure that we have the right structures and meeting rhythms in place so that we can take the decisions at different levels, but we can also cope with a certain amount of flexibility and unpredictability to make sure that we're on top of what's happening in real time and being able to respond to the needs of everybody across our islands.
Okay, well, this has been a few storms for you now since you've been here. What are your personal thoughts on how things are going and conditions across the island?
Well, I continue to be really impressed actually by the professionalism of everybody who's responding. So that's all of the government entities. I know the NRA have been very active, but also, you know, the water, the electricity, everyone who's providing infrastructure and going out to check on the damages, the Red Cross and the volunteers, and obviously our National Hazard Management Cayman Islands, working with the police and the emergency services. There's really good professionalism and there's good join up. And I think if you have both of those things, then everybody can work together to be flexible and to respond to what is happening on an hourly basis, which is exactly what is currently happening with the need to respond to flooding. So we were a bit more worried about wind 24 hours ago. Now we're just worried about water, aren't we? And, you know, that is the priority.
Now, there's so many moving parts and hundreds of people that volunteer and that are a part of the preparations for our islands throughout the entire hurricane season and, of course, throughout the year, really. Tell us how important it is to have those meetings on a consistent basis with the parties that are all involved. How important is that?
Yeah, it's really important, and I'm very pleased that it kind of happens at different levels. So obviously we have the executive where we have the whole of cabinet, but also the police are represented, obviously the hazard management guys as well, and the communications is really important. So we have meetings to sort of look at the strategy for what we're doing and take some of the big decisions, and it's great to have our parliamentarians there because they know what is being told them by all of their constituents. But then we have a sort of strategic level beneath that, and then a tactical level, and all of these different levels are having to make different decisions, and it's really important that is kind of separated, because then it means that it's the most efficient way of doing it. And we're able to empower the people who are really out there making tactical decisions on an hourly basis about what to do about the electricity, what to do about the pumping. That should obviously, you know, be done at that level without having to keep referring everything back up. So I think that system works really well.
Okay, thank you, Your Excellency. Deputy Premier Ebanks, what is the top priority for the government at this stage?
First, I'll just make a couple of overarching points. One, I'm standing in for the Premier because she cannot be here. She's in Cayman Brac. She has been participating in all the relevant meetings by Zoom. So we also want to wish all of our folks in the sister islands well as well. Second point is, let's praise God. Because as I look at that laptop and look at the cone, it could have been far, far worse. So to lead back to your question, the top priority, of course, is safety. Safety for all of our people, safety for our school-age children, safety for our elderly. So I've been really impressed by, one, the communications to let folks know what is happening in real time. We know that there, particularly this morning, there are tricky judgment calls because at midnight it looked pretty dry. I was still awake at midnight. It didn't sound like much was happening. By the time you roll out of bed at about 4 o'clock, you can hear the intensity of the storms. Decision needs to be made in real time. So I've been really, really impressed with the communication at all levels, from those who are at the executive level and then getting those information out to communities in terms of schools and what's happening. I think communication has been key.
Okay, speaking of information, there's also misinformation that comes out across all platforms sometimes. What would you say to the public about that and where they should be getting their source of information from?
You know the answer to that question, Donna. Official sources. Continue to only get your information from official government channels.
Okay, so I talked to Her Excellency about the meetings. How important is it for the government arm, the elected leaders, to be a part of these meetings, and particularly as it relates to your constituencies, but the country overall?
Hugely important, because although you'll have the technical teams who are working, you have Doppler radar, you have all of the other tools, but it's hugely important to have the information on the ground. So once members of cabinet/caucus get information from their constituencies, you can then see whether or not it matches at both levels, what's actually happening on the ground and what you're seeing from the skies and from maps. And then you're able to then collaborate and help each other. So there were parts of areas of, say, West Bay that didn't necessarily look as troubled or challenged, but then this morning have been, and equipment was moved around and thought, okay, we need to get back there. So I can think of, say, Batabanu Road. There was a pump there. Minister then turned back and realized they needed to go back there to help those areas. That's because of real-time intelligence and the sharing of data.
Okay. Any final words to members of the public out there as we continue to get some adverse and inclement weather from what is now Hurricane Helene?
Yeah, I think my one bit of advice was let's all continue to be prepared. This has happened this week. We don't know what will happen next week or next month. We're still not out of the hurricane season yet. And however much we might do at government level and working with our fabulous teams, we really need all members of the community to be part of that response, looking out for each other and making sure that everyone is prepared. So keep the sandbags. If you've got sandbags, keep them because you might need them in future. Continue to make sure that you know what you're going to do in an emergency and that you've got the supplies you need, and we can, continue to help support you in that.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Premier?
Similar thoughts. Looking at Mr. Carey, Chief, we still don't have the all clear yet, right? Exactly. So even if it looks calm at particular periods, until you actually hear the all clear, remain cautious, remain vigilant. Again, reiterate the importance of adhering to government channels. And to the governor's point, to reiterate that point, we're still not out of hurricane season. So I think in one of the last press briefings, I think the analogy I might have used was boxing. Keep your guard up.
Okay, Your Excellency, Deputy Premier Ebanks, thank you both for being here with us and providing your thoughts and insights on what is happening with us locally weather-wise. In just a few moments, we're going to be talking to the Chief Meteorologist of the Cayman Islands National Weather Services, Mr. Kerry Powery. He will bring us up to speed on exactly what is happening with Helene and, of course, the weather conditions here locally. Again, Deputy Premier and Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. Now I'm going to call on Mr. Powery to join us here on set to talk more about what is happening with our weather conditions. Mr. Powery? It's a pleasure to have you here with us, of course. Let's begin by talking about Helene and what happened overnight. I think people, as we move closer on into the week, they were expecting not as much rain last night as we got the night before. So let's talk about Helene and what happened with her overnight and where she is now.
Okay, when we last spoke, it was a tropical storm, 60 miles per hour, and now at 10 o'clock this morning, she became a hurricane. That's a 20 mile per hour increase in wind speeds. And if you look at the pressure, it was a 12 millibar drop in 6 hours, again highlighting the rapid intensification of this system went through. And if you follow the forecasters from National Hurricane Center, they're even suggesting that even further rapid intensification is likely from this storm, possibly making her a major hurricane of Category 3 or more by probably this time tomorrow morning.
Where does it look like she's heading? I mean, people say that right now she's in the Gulf of Mexico and is heading into Florida. But what areas of Florida, from the predictions that you've seen, could she most impact?
From the impact maps that they have, they're looking like the Big Bend towards the Panhandle area. But again, you have to keep update. The storm changes. There's other upper level system that play a role as to the steering currents and where it eventually will go. So that's the point that we heard here before, that we need to keep updated keep monitoring the situation as it can change rapidly.
Okay, so Helen has moved away from us, but let's talk about the local impact that she's left behind. Lots of rain, probably more than, even though the warnings were put in place, more than most residents actually expected. Let's talk about some of the impact that she caused.
Okay, our major concern even from the start was flood. We anticipated between Sunday and Monday roughly about 18 inches of rainfall. So far to date, we had about 9 inches, close to 10 inches of rainfall over Grand Cayman, right? So we're expecting some of these bands. What happened is with the strengthening of Helen into a hurricane, these spiral bands also in themselves become more intense. So that's what we got. We got caught in between one of those rain bands, and we had, when you see radar images, you will see that the intensity of the colors, the yellows and the oranges, those are indicative of heavier type of showers, which gave us those squally conditions. We had a report from Cayman Brac of gust nearly 70 miles an hour. So those are the type of squally conditions that can be expected in these spiral bands associated with a strong developing hurricane.
Okay, so a tropical storm warning was given for the island of Grand Cayman, and then it was lifted, and persons just started to move around before getting the all clear, which hasn't been given yet, by the way. Why is it important for people to listen to the words that are contained in these messages?
Because even from before we went into hurricane season, we were talking about flood warnings and marine warnings, and those have continued even after the tropical storm warnings were lifted. So we anticipated severe conditions. These rain bands, we caught in one or two of them, and those extreme rainfall numbers, that's what we expected. We expected the winds to pick up along with the strengthening of the storm, and for that reason we expected we pushed those marine warnings to ensure that boat operators would seek safe harbor and protect their boats, and we wanted people to move away from the coast to prevent any accidental drowning by taking part in waterborne activities. So we had in mind these conditions to linger. What's problematic is telling you specifically what to expect. So we predicted, as I mentioned before, up to 18 inches from Sunday through Thursday. Now we're almost through it, and we have about 10 inches. We expect some more to the end tomorrow, potentially up to another 4 inches or so. So the elevated tides have also played a role, especially for this morning. These bands came in around the time of high tide, so that's what exacerbated the flooding that some of our residents experienced today. So high tides will continue to play a role for a couple of weeks. So we have to be mindful of when we see these heavy bouts of showers that localized flooding is likely.
Okay. Any idea when we might hear about an all clear being given? That means that people can really officially move about? Not
Trouble.
Not sure. Okay.
We gradually expect as Hurricane Helen moves out of the way that conditions will improve. We expect the spiral bands to finally move out of our area, but we don't anticipate that till probably tomorrow evening. So we still have this likelihood of these heavy bouts of showers, squally conditions, through tonight mainly, and maybe begin to improve from tomorrow. The discussion could start tomorrow afternoon, evening, as to when we could go with the all clear, but it's all pending on model projections.
Okay. All right, Mr. Perry, thank you so much for that update. We really appreciate that. Now we're going to have joining us on set Ms. Teresita Da Silva from the Hazard Management Cayman Islands, as well as Inspector Ian Yearwood from the Royal Cayman Islands Police Force. They're going to be talking, police service rather. They're going to be talking to us about what's happening from their neck of the woods. All right, so we're going to have Teresita join us, and Mr. Yearwood, you can join us in just a few minutes. So.
Donna.
Welcome, Teresita. So tell us from an HMCI standpoint, what is happening? Are you able to speak about the technology that's being used by your department and how that's been able to help with preparations for this particular storm?
Of course. So from hazard management perspective, we deal a lot with data sets and mapping. So for us, we've been working with fire, police, as well as 911. And as calls come in regarding flooded roads or flooded homes, we're mapping that onto our system and feed that information to Public Works or NRA so that they can go out on the roads and tackle these issues, as well as put out advisory in regard to what areas you should avoid. In addition to that, we use this as historical data. So when another incident occurs, we can speak to police, speak to fire, and they can understand exactly what areas they should be looking at before something happens, because we now know, okay, these specific areas will flood when we get certain types of rains.
Okay. Is there anything that the general public can do to help with that data, with the collection of that data in times like this? Is there anything that we can do? Take pictures, video, whatever.
So we've actually been working with our community teams, and they've been feeding that information back up to us because we want to make sure that it's uniformed in a specific way. So instead of getting the same pictures over and over, we've been using these teams because they know their communities. They understand what areas would be flooded. So they've been feeding us to us directly to our office. In addition to that, we do have teams that are trained to go out and do these assessments in a safe manner. So we utilize them as well. While we do use the pictures that come in from the public, we're trying to make sure that it's in a certain format and unified. And so we use these teams that have been trained and know how to provide the data to us to make it a lot easier for when we're inputting it into our systems and spitting out reports. So while we do appreciate some of the pictures, as you know, some of the pictures may not be accurate or truthful. We see some false news that is circulating. So we use our trusted sources and trained personnel on the ground to provide that to us.
Okay. For those who may not know out there, exactly what's the job of Hazard Management Cayman Islands throughout the year, really, but particularly at times like this?
So throughout the year, we're doing a plethora of things. So we're training, we're preparing, we're mitigating, and prepping our response by working with multi-agencies. During incidents such as this, we're doing a lot of multi-agency coordination. So in our office at this time, we have fire, police. We're also speaking with 911. We have NRA on hand if we need them. And it's just making sure that it's a joined-up approach to this event and not just working in silos. Because if we work in silos, then there'd be a lot of gaps in our responses. So by having this multi-agency coordination that we tend to lead, we're ensuring that it's one message going out to the public, we're having the right people around the table, and we're speaking to the right elected members so that we can utilize them to get the message out, as well as get information from them on the ground, because obviously they know their constituents, they can feed back information to us, and then we can feed this into our response.
Okay. The key is always being prepared. So
Yes,
where
ma'am.
can persons go, if they don't know at this point, to get the correct information and how to be prepared during times like this?
They can go to caymanprepared.gov.ky, and we have a number of information on that. We have booklets on there in regard to multi-hazard preparedness as well as hurricane preparedness. Because as we know, it's not just hurricanes that we have to worry about. It could be earthquakes, flooding, and a different number of hazards. So we try to prep the community on a number of hazards that they have to prepare for, not just during hurricane season, but all year round. So we have a great resource there, and government tends to distribute a lot of information as well. So trusted sources such as government and Cayman Prepared and the Weather Service.
Okay. Any final words?
Just keep prepared, be vigilant on the roads, ensure you adhere to government advice, and always make sure that you have your emergency kit, not just a hurricane kit, but your emergency kit throughout the year so that you're not constantly going back to the supermarket every time there's inclement weather.
Okay. Teresita, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for that update from Hazard Management Cayman Islands. Now joining me, I have Inspector Ian Yearwood from the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. He's going to be talking to us about what his team he's responsible for.
The emergency response cluster.
All right, there you go. So he is responsible for the emergency response cluster, which means everything that happens on our roads with the traffic, so on and so forth. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about traffic. Last night, we got a lot more rain. This morning, we woke up to more flooding, as we were told earlier this week would and could happen. How has your teams been able to respond since last night, and how are they handling today?
So the teams, I want to say that the emergency response cluster, we look at the community emergency response teams, CERT. We also deal with evacuation. We also deal with search and rescue, as well as emergency law enforcement as well. So we're made up of the Coast Guard, fire response, the regiment, police, and the more members at the, well, I said CERT and the airport authority.
Okay.
So in our response, we've been working throughout these responses for this incident with fire and the police as well as National Roads Authority.
Right.
So as Teresita highlighted, we've got a number of roads that are, we are seeing about 2 to 3 foot of water in some areas. And we're asking people, please, if you can avoid traveling on those roads, please do not travel on those roads if you can avoid it. And the reason behind it is that this water needs to go somewhere. If we drive through this water, it's going to be displaced and it's going to end up in the homes of people. You know, and this would lead to flooding. So we're asking you to be very vigilant. Take your time. This has been my message from yesterday. Take your times on our roads. You don't want to add now to the flooding and we have motor vehicle accidents or collisions, or we have, you know, any unnecessary responses that would take away from our response to the incident as it is, to have to deal with incidents such as motor vehicle accidents. So I'm going to ask you to also please be very vigilant. We've already seen that there are photos out there, videos out there that are causing people to panic, which is fake. Please follow official channels to get your information.
Which are channels from the all agencies in the Cayman Islands government.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. So what kind of has there been any kind of call outs or evacuations that have had to take place, or reports of people's homes actually been flooding this time around?
So we had one evacuation yesterday, but like Kerry highlighted, we're still expecting and we're still getting weather system, so we're still going to get rain. So it means now that for the last day or so, we've had rain. There's more rain to come, so which means it's going to add, the potential for flooding is going to get greater. And we expect that we will have some of those response to do some evacuations. So we're asking people also, if you can help yourselves, if you realize that your areas or your homes are beginning to get flooded, you know, secure your stuff. But we've already opened the Red Cross shelter. We have one shelter so far there, but I'm asking you, please don't wait till you are, you know, flooded in to need our help. We need you to also to help yourselves.
Okay. And what if people need to call, if they need help and can't help themselves, where should they call?
So for the emergency, if it is an emergency, call 911. For the non-emergencies, you can call any of the district police stations.
Okay. Inspector Yearwood, any final words?
I'm just going to ask people to remain safe, remain vigilant, and be prepared.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And of course, we thank you, our listening public out there. We hope that you've been enlightened by all that's been shared here this afternoon here on CIG Television. I'm Donna Bush. I wish everyone out there a safe and, of course, a dry day ahead.